All right, let's jump right into a fascinating, highly analytical dispute today. We are going to examine how abstract legal hermeneutics, meaning the highly precise methods used to interpret ancient texts, actually dictate physical, real-world consequences. We're going to bypass the basics today and dive straight into the mechanics of legal derivation, just to see how a single interpretive formula can completely rewrite the rules of reality.
Imagine this for a second. You're sitting at the dinner table, you pour yourself a nice glass of apple wine, or maybe you're using a bit of date honey to sweeten a dish. But there's a catch. The apples and the dates used to make these liquids were legally restricted. So the question on the table is this. If a fruit is restricted by law, is its juice restricted too? Does the physical act of extracting the juice magically change the legal status of the food?
Let's start with a baseline scenario to ground our case, the forbidden fruit juice. We need to clearly define the stakes here. We're talking about the priestly portion. This is agricultural produce that has been legally designated and set aside exclusively for consumption by priests. And under Torah law, if a non-priest consumes this sacred produce, it is a serious violation. The law demands a very specific financial penalty. The violator has to repay the principal value of what they ate, plus an additional 1/5 penalty fine. So, bringing this broad legal theory down to our visceral dinner table reality, our case study centers on a non-priest who consumes not the solid fruit of the priestly portion, but its extracts. Specifically, they drink date honey, apple wine, or vinegar made from stunted, end-of-season grapes that weren't really fit for regular wine anyway. All of these beverages were derived directly from restricted priestly portion fruits. The question is, do they owe the principal and that 1/5 penalty?
Well, this creates an immediate, incredibly sharp split in the ruling. On one side, we have Rabbi Eliezer, who rules strictly. The non-priest is absolutely obligated to repay the principal plus the 1/5 penalty. For him, the liquid is treated exactly like the solid fruit. But on the other side, Rabbi Yahosua takes the exact opposite stance. He says the non-priest is entirely exempt from the penalty, no fine at all.
Which brings us to two entirely different paths of interpretation.
You see, we are dealing with hermeneutics here, the methodological principles of interpretation. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yahosua are operating from two entirely different interpretive philosophies. It helps to think of these methodologies almost like competing mathematical formulas. Depending on which formula you plug the raw data into, you're going to get a fundamentally different output. The crucial point comes down to these competing principles. Rabbi Eliezer's formula is infer from it and again from it, meaning when you derive a law from a source case, you apply all the details to the new case, and then you expand it even further. It's this expansive domino effect kind of logic. Rabbi Yehoshua's formula, however, is infer from it, but interpret the law according to its own place. This means you derive the basic principle from the source, sure, but then you immediately hit the brakes and restrict the specific details to fit only the new context. It is a highly localized, restrictive logic.
Let's map exactly how Rabbi Eliezer's logical chain of infer and infer again works in practice.
Walking through Rabbi Eliezer's step-by-step logic goes like this. Step 1. He looks at a separate area of law altogether, the first fruits brought to the temple. In that law, it's firmly established that the juice of the first fruits is restricted just like the solid fruit. Step 2. He infers from it. He essentially copies and pastes that baseline rule over to the priestly portion. Step 3. He infers again. Since the law of first fruits applies broadly to all the varied species for which the land is praised, dates, figs, pomegranates, he expands the priestly portion juice restriction to encompass all fruits.
The inevitable conclusion of that expansive formula is pretty strict. Under Rabbi Eliezer's framework, extracting the juice basically never removes the legal restriction. Therefore, our non-priest drinking the date honey or the apple wine carries the exact same financial penalty as if they had just eaten a handful of solid dates or apples. His legal logic expands to cover everything.
Now, contrast that with Rabbi Yehoshua's competing framework to interpret it in its place.
Let's trace Rabbi Yeshua's steps. Step 1 actually starts out the exact same. He infers the basic rule from first fruits to the priestly portion, agreeing that yes, juices can indeed be restricted. But step 2 is where the formula dramatically shifts. He stops and he interprets in its place. He looks closely at the local context of the priestly portion itself. When those specific texts discuss liquid priestly portions, they explicitly and almost exclusively highlight wine and oil. So in step 3, he strictly restricts the derived law exclusively to grapes and olives.
Because his methodology forces him to localize the law to its specific context, the outcome is entirely different.
Under Rabbi Yahoshua's framework, the prohibition against drinking juices only applies to grape wine and olive oil, meaning the non-priest sitting at our dinner table drinking date honey or apple wine is entirely exempt from the penalty.
And this framework doesn't just act as a one-off defense. It reshapes other areas of agricultural law too, starting with the rule of first fruits.
What's really fascinating here is how Rabbi Yahoshua applies his logic in reverse. We know you can bring beverages made from first fruits to the temple. But which ones? Well, Rabbi Yahoshua derives the laws of first fruits from the priestly portion. Because he interpretively restricted the priestly portion juices to only wine and oil, he applies that exact same limitation back to the temple offerings. As a result, only wine from grapes and oil from olives can be brought to the temple as first fruit beverages. If you try to bring date honey or, say, pomegranate juice as a first fruit beverage, it's just not accepted.
Finally, this exact same limiting principle extends into a third major category, the first 3 years of a tree's growth.
Let's be clear. The baseline prohibition here is incredibly strict. Under Torah law, consuming the fruit of any tree during its first 3 years of growth is absolutely forbidden. And unlike a simple financial penalty, violating this law is punishable by literal, physical lashes, which, you have to admit, certainly raises the stakes on drinking a glass of apple juice at the dinner table.
So, the big question, does a person actually get lashes for drinking the juice of a restricted apple or date? Rabbi Yahoshua, again, uses a highly specific hermeneutic tool here, a verbal analogy. Step 1. He notes the legal text for the first 3 years uses the specific word fruit. Step 2. He notes the text for first fruits also uses the word fruit. Step 3. He links them together. Since he already proved that the juice of first fruits is legally limited to grapes and olives, he transfers that exact limitation over to the first 3 years. Result? You only receive lashes for drinking grape wine or olive oil made from a tree in its first 3 years. Date honey or apple wine? No lashes. You are exempt.
This brilliantly illustrates the sheer consistency of his methodology. When we look across this matrix of 3 entirely different categories of agricultural law, the priestly portion, the temple offerings of first fruits, and the severe prohibition of a tree's first 3 years, Rabbi Yahoshua's interpretive framework holds incredibly firm. Grapes and olives always retain their legal status when extracted into wine and oil. But apples and dates, once extracted into wine and honey, they are consistently exempted or excluded. The formula literally dictates the reality every single time.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We started with 2 physical glasses on a dinner table, apple wine and date honey. We discovered that their legal permissibility actually had nothing to do with the physical liquids themselves and everything to do with whether we chose to infer and infer again or interpret in its place. If pure legal logic can transform a restricted apple into a permissible drink while a grape remains strictly forbidden, how much of our own daily reality is entirely shaped by the interpretive frameworks we choose to apply? It's a pretty powerful reminder that the formulas we use to read the text ultimately write the rules of our world.